Okay, here is today's bell assignment. Please pause the video so that they can do these on their own paper. When they are finished, have them put them on the board and go over them with them, and then you can hit play on the video. Okay. What we're talking about today is lesson 65, circumference and pi. Recall from investigation 2. It says recall from investigation 2. I know that you all know that we don't do the investigation, so guess what? We're going to be learning something today. Okay? A circle is a smooth curve, every point of which is the same distance from the center. Okay? The distance from the center to the circle is called the radius. The plural of radius is radii. The distance across the circle through the center is the diameter. The distance around the circle is the circumference. So, the distance from the center of the circle to the edge is called the radius. And you can have that at any point on the circle. As long as you start at the center, it is still the radius. Anywhere you want to have it, you can have it, or you can put it, and it is still the radius, as long as it's from the center straight to the edge of the circle. Any point or any line that is through the center of the circle and from one edge of the circle to the other is a diameter. Okay, that's the distance across the circle. The circumference is the distance around the circle, similar to what we think of with polygons being the perimeter. Okay, it's the distance around the outside. We see that the diameter of a circle is twice the radius of the circle. In the following activity, we investigate the relationship between blah, 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 blah. Okay. What we're talking about here is how many diameters equal a circumference. Mathematicians investigated this question for thousands of years. They found that the answer did not depend on the size of the circle. The circumference of every circle is slightly more than 3 diameters. Slightly more than 3 diameters. Another way to illustrate this fact is to cut a length of string equal to the diameter of a particular circle and find how many of these lengths are needed to reach around the circle. No matter what size of the circle, it takes 3 diameters plus a little extra to equal the circumference. Okay, so they say, here's this little small circle. This is the diameter wrapped around it one time. Then they wrapped around it again. Then they wrapped around it a third time, and they still had this little piece left. They made the circle a little bigger. They took the diameter and they wrapped it around it. They wrapped it around it again. They wrapped it a third time, and once again they have this little piece left. Made the circle a little bigger. They wrapped it around it once, twice, 3 times, and we still have this piece that's left over. The extra amount needed is about, but not exactly, 1/7 of a diameter. Thus, the number of diameters needed to equal the circumference of a circle is about, and down here we have written 3 1/7, which we also call 22/7. This is what they will talk about, usually not this one. Or the decimal form, which is 3.14, and we all know that that is rounded to 2 decimal places. Okay, it goes on and on and on. So neither 3 1/7 nor 3.14 is an exact number of diameters needed. They are approximations. There is no fraction or decimal number that states the exact number of diameters in a circle. Some computers have calculated the number to more than 1 million decimal places. We use the symbol right here, okay, which is the Greek letter pi, pronounced like pie that you eat, to represent this number. Note that pi is not a variable. Rather, pi is a constant because its value does not vary. Okay? It may look like a variable because it kind of looks like a letter or something we would plug in, but pi is always pi. It is always 3.14. It is always 22/7. It is always 1 1/7. And although those 3 things I just said are not the same, they are the same. They are the equivalent of each other. Okay, it's like 1 foot and 12 inches. They're not the same, but they're equal. Okay, they don't sound the same, but they're equal. So those are all 3 different things that we can plug in, but it's still the same number. Okay, Circumference. The circumference of a circle is pi times the diameter of the circle. This idea is expressed by this formula. You should write that in your notes. Circumference equals pi times diameter. In this formula, C stands for the circumference and D stands for the diameter. To perform calculations with pi, we use an approximation. The commonly used approximations for pi are 3.14 and 22 over 7. Okay, and whenever it wants you to use one or the other, it will tell you. Even on your test or a review, it will say use 3.14 for pi or use 22 over 7 for pi. For calculations that require great accuracy, more accurate approximations for pi may be used, such as 3.14159265359. Okay, so you can take that number for pi and extend it on further to be more exact if it needs to be. But for what we're going to be doing, mostly sticking with that 3.14 or 22 over 7. Sometimes pi is left as pi. Unless directed otherwise, we use 3.14 for pi for calculations in this book. The radius of a circle is 10 centimeters. What is the circumference? So the first thing that they say is the radius of a circle. We need to draw a circle. Okay, so we have now a circle. Ooh, that did not recognize what I wanted it to. That'll work. Okay, so the radius of a circle, recall that a radius was the distance from the center of the circle to the edge of the circle, and they tell us that that distance is 10 centimeters. The question they ask is, what is the circumference? So we just found, or we were just given, the formula for circumference, which we said was C equals pi times diameter. Okay? So they want to know what the circumference is. Before we can find the circumference, we need to find the diameter, because right now all we have is the radius. Remember from the first slide that I showed you that the radius, okay, is half the diameter. So 2 radius would give us the diameter. So if this distance is 10, this distance is also 10 centimeters, which means that our diameter is 20 centimeters. Alright, they just told us that unless otherwise told, we're going to use 3.14 for pi. So I'm solving for circumference C. Instead of pi, I'm going to put 3.14. And instead of diameter, I'm going to put, instead of diameter, I'm going to put 20 centimeters. Okay, so all we have to do now is plug this into our calculators, and you should get circumference equals 62.8 centimeters. Final answer. As long as you know your formula, you should be able to solve these pretty easily. I need to see the formula, I need to see what you substituted, and I need to see the answer with a label. If you have those, and I also need to see the circle that you drawn. Okay, if you have those 4 things, you are in good shape. Okay, I want to see those on every problem that you do like this. Alright. Find the circumference of each circle. Okay, so on the first one, A, it tells us to use, this is a use, 3.14 for pi. So once again, I'm talking about circumference, so I'm going to use my formula. C equals pi times diameter. So they give us the diameter on this circle, so I don't have to do much. All I have to do is substitute. C equals, instead of pi, they said to use 3.14. So I'm going to substitute that in. Remember, when we substitute, we always use parentheses. And instead of the diameter, I'm going to use that 30 inches that they showed us. So I'm going to put in 30 inches. Whoa. Wow, sorry. 30 inches. So 30 inches times that pi of 3.14 is going to give us a circumference of 94.2 inches. Final answer. Okay? Very, very little work to be done there. On B, it's asking us for the same thing. It wants us to find the circumference. So again, I'm going to start with C equals pi times diameter. Now wait a second, I just wrote the formula. Do I have to write it again? Yes, you have to write it again. Every time that you find the circumference, I expect you to write the formula. So I have c equals pi times diameter. This time they tell us to use 22 over 7 for pi. And again, they went ahead and they gave us that diameter. So I have c equals, instead of pi, I'm going to put 22 over 7. And instead of diameter, I'm going to put 14 feet. And because the pi is represented as a fraction, I'm going to make this a fraction by putting it over 1. Now, whenever I do this, I can just multiply straight across. So I have c equals, and on top, I'm going to multiply 22 times 14 and get 308 feet, over 7 times 1, which gets me 7. So all I have to do now is the division indicated by the fraction bar. So 308 divided by 7 gets me 44 feet. Okay, final answer there. On the last one, again, it wants us to find the circumference. So again, I'm going to start with c equals pi times diameter. This time, though, it says to leave pi as pi. That means I'm not going to substitute in 3.14. I'm not going to substitute in 22 over 7. I'm going to leave pi as pi. So this time, they gave us the radius. So whenever I have the radius, I can take 2 of those to find the diameter. So I know that the diameter of this circle is 20 centimeters. So I have circumference equals pi times 20 centimeters, because they told us to leave pi as pi, and instead of the diameter I put 20 centimeters. So whenever I simplify this, I usually want my number first, my coefficient, so I have c equals 20 pi, and then I'll label it centimeters. Final answer, I know that that looks kind of funny, but that's just the way that we do it. So if they tell you to leave pi, or to leave pi as pi, then pi is going to be part of your answer. If it's not there, then it's going to be wrong, okay? That's what they want us to use. For your homework, Lesson 65, A through D, 1 through 5, and 15 through 29 odd. Once again, make sure that you are working quietly and individually. If you have questions, please raise your hand. And don't be talking to your neighbor or distracting others in the room. If you are too talkative, this assignment can change very quickly to all of the problems instead of just what I have listed here. Make sure this gets put on the assignment board, and have a good day. I will see you tomorrow.